So in this lesson, we're going to look at a couple different ways to do a write-on effect, to do an animated signature, basically. I haven't found any easy way to do this, so I'm going to show you two methods, and you can choose the one that works best for you. In this first method, we're going to use a paint stroke that animates on very easily with a behavior. Now, even within this first method, there's two approaches to using this method. There's the paint stroke tool down here, and there's the Bezier pen tool. So if you're using like a Wacom tablet and you have good handwriting, you could use the paint stroke to do a cursive handwriting. So for instance, I'm going to write the word peace. So I'm going to make a P, I'm going to lift up the mouse, and I'm going to write E, A, and I'm using a mouse, and my handwriting is horrific. So you can see what I did there quickly. I wrote just a pretty horrible thing. And that's why I don't really prefer this method. But if you're good with a Wacom tablet, you're good with writing, this could work well for you. So we end up with this handwritten text that I want to animate on. And all you need to do to animate it on is to use a behavior. So with this selected, I'm selecting the P first. We have separate paint strokes. Every time you lift up or let go of the mouse or lift up the pen, you end up with a separate paint stroke. So I'll take that first one, and from the Behaviors pop-up menu, I'm going to go to Shape, and I'm going to choose Write On. And now that first P will animate on. Now it's taking the entire project to write on. I don't want that, so I'll just move to where I want it to stop. It may say about a second or so, hit O, and now that P writes on much faster. And after it writes on, I want the rest of it to write on. So I'll select the balance, the rest of the word. I'll tap I, so it starts right there. And then what I'll do is I'll once again choose, I could either choose it from here or I could option drag this guy. I'll option drag this guy onto it and extend it out so it takes a little longer. And that way we have P, and then we write the rest of it on. And obviously, because my handwriting is so bad, it doesn't look great, but the animation looks decent. And then if you know a little bit about paint strokes, there's a lot you can do with what these paint strokes look like. Besides changing the color of the paint strokes, you can actually change them more to an airbrush. You can change the airbrush width. You can change the profile so it looks a little more solid outline. There's actually a huge amount of things you can do to adjust paint strokes. There's this whole Stroke Advanced and Geometry tabs. You can right-click on this and choose to edit points, which will give you all the points. And here's one reason I don't like to use the paint stroke tool. It creates a huge number of points. So if you want to clean it up, that's a lot of points to adjust or delete. You can certainly delete points you don't want just by hitting the delete key, but it's a lot of work to go in here and try to clean things up. But that is one approach. I really suggest our paint strokes and shapes and mass tutorial to get deep into how to use paint. So the second method within this one approach is to use the Bezier tool. The reason I like the Bezier tool, if you're going to use this approach, is it only lays points down when you click, as opposed to the paint stroke tool that as you draw is laying down points automatically. So here, if I were to try to do the same thing, I could click once here and once down here to draw a little curve, then once up here, and there's my P. Then I'll click down here, I'll click here. I'm clicking and dragging to try to create these letters. And then you can even move points while you're drawing, which is kind of nice. Move and adjust points. And then maybe I'll go up here. And I'm trying to do this all as one stroke, as you can see here. And again, I'm doing a bit of a butcher job, but I want to show you the basic idea of how you can do this with a paint stroke tool or with the Bezier tool. And you don't have to do it all as one stroke, but the nice thing about doing it as one stroke is that you can then animate it all on in one go. Curve that down a little bit more and over that those a little more. It's nice that it's fully adjustable and we have many fewer points to work with. This point has kind of a hard edge. I'm going to command down and make it curved. Try to line these up a little bit more. So I'm doing it as if you had to wrote with a cursive pen where you never picked the pen up. So it's pretty ugly, but it's not as ugly as it was the first time when I used the pen tool. So now that it's done, I'll hit return, and we've got a stroke on there. And once again, I'll choose to use the behavior pop-up menu down in the toolbar, shape, right on, go here at O, set a play range out point, and that animates on. So another option. One other thing I'd mention, in the right on behavior itself, you can choose a speed, and sometimes this one called natural can look a little more, quote, natural as it's writing on. But you've got a lot of options here on how this thing draws on. It can draw on, it can erase instead of drawing on, and it can go backwards instead of forwards. So a lot of different options, but usually what you want is what it does by default. So that's a couple of different ways of approaching this first method, which is using a paint stroke. Let's look at another method. And this method is nice because you can use any kind of text. You can use a scanned signature, or you can use any kind of font. So now I have an actual text layer. The basic method here goes back to the masking lesson we used earlier, that we're going to use a series of paint strokes as masks to reveal these letters. I'm not going to do the whole thing here because it would be boring to watch me do the whole thing, but I'll show you the basic approach. So what I'm going to do is I select the overall group here, and I'm going to select the Bezier tool. And what I want to do is draw a series of strokes that cover the letter. And these will be separate strokes in this case. They don't have to be. So that would be the curve of the P. I'll hit return. And if it's not quite right, these don't need to be perfect. The main thing is they cover it. And you can always make them thicker if they're not thick enough. So if I hit F7, it brings up the heads up display. I can always change the width of that stroke. It's okay if it's wider. The whole idea is just it has to cover it. So that would be my first one. Then I'd go back to the Bezier tool for my next stroke, which would come down here and hit return. And again, I'd make that wider. And then for my next stroke, I could actually start out by starting out with it wider, so it's wide to begin with. And I'll try to make the E here follow along with the E. And hit return, and that covers the E pretty nicely. So you're going to end up with a series of strokes, and then you're going to use them all. So I'm going to take them all, and I'm going to choose Object Group to put them in a new group, and I'll call it strokes. And those are going to be my masks with which I'm going to reveal the text. So each one of these will need a write-on behavior, and each one will need a certain duration. So this takes a little bit more work to set up in terms of how they animate on. So the first one, I'll choose to add on the shape write-on behavior, and I'll trim it to be pretty short. So it's going to write that first one on there. And then I want the second one. So select the second one, tap I to have it start here, and Option drag the write-on behavior onto it. And then the second one writes on. Now that second one is actually going to get in the way of the first one a little bit. So I'm going to right-click on it, choose Edit Points, and move that point down a little further, about there. Okay? And let's just do the third one here. So then the third one we'd want to start after the second one. So we'll move forward in time. And we'll press I to trim it to start right when the last one ends. I'll Option drag the write-on behavior onto it. And now if we play through that, we've got this set of strokes laying on there. So to make them work, let's close that up. I'll select the text layer, Object, Add Image Mask. And then for the image mask, I'm going to want the strokes. So I'll drag the strokes into there, go back to the beginning, and if I play now, we can see that gets written on. Now, mostly it works, but you can see that first stroke revealed part of the P going down, which doesn't necessarily look that good. So the way you can fix that kind of thing, and this is where I don't find any super easy way to do this stuff. It takes a little bit of elbow grease. I'm going to go back on and turn those strokes on. You can see the stroke is so thick. I'm going to Command Spacebar and zoom in a little bit here. That I really don't want this stroke to be that thick there. So I can right-click and choose Edit Points. I'm going to Option click to add another point right there, and just maybe move this guy up so it doesn't show so much of the P when it comes down. And then I'll turn this whole group off so I can see what's happening. So now when this first stroke goes through, I'll move this up even further, you can see where I'm adjusting exactly how much this reveals. And it's hard to get it exactly right. It takes a little bit of real elbow grease to get this to be exactly right. Shift Z to fit it to the window. and that's a little better. Maybe I'd speed the whole thing up. By the same token, when this E draws on, you get a little too much down there. So again, I could zoom in, find the one that controls the E. It's this guy right here. And when it's first drawing on, right there, I don't like how much of that's being revealed, so I could just move this back more like that. Shift Z, okay? And it's basically a step-by-step process to work through, but you can end up with a nice animation. In fact, I have here a completed version of it that you can see what it looks like. And we can look at our mass strokes. So you can see I've got a whole bunch of separate strokes. It doesn't take that long to do, but it does take a little bit of work to create this kind of animation. But for me, it allows you to create a very nice animation using a nice font to animate on the screen. So there you go, two separate ways to create a write-on effect for text in motion.